Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Idea to Value podcast. I'm your host, Nick Skillicorn, and I'm thrilled to have with me today John Saunders. John is the author of the innovation book, The Optimizer, and he spent more than 2 decades as a Wall Street senior vice president, sales team leader, and award-winning sales executive. He followed his passion helping others go forward with a coaching and consultancy company, Forward Advisory Solutions, and is also an active angel investor. John, it's wonderful speaking with you today.
Nick, great to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome to the Idea to Value podcast, where in every episode we highlight the latest insights into creativity and innovation from experts around the world. I'm your host, Nick Skillicorn. I care about the evidence behind what makes ideas happen, and I've already helped thousands of people just like you through my unique insights into recent scientific findings of how creativity works. I also show you how to turbocharge innovation programs so they finally deliver on the value and ideas you've been struggling to execute. Get your free training on how creativity can be improved by registering now at www.ideatovalue.com. Now let's get on with today's episode. So, John, for people who don't know about you and the work that you do, could you just give us a brief background as to where you got started and how you got to where you are now?
Sure. As you mentioned there, I spent a couple of decades working on Wall Street, and I had my company got sold a couple summers ago, and this happens right and from time to time. And somebody gave me some wonderful advice, and they said, "Go immerse yourself in something that you enjoy, and your value proposition will manifest itself." And I remember when she said that to me, and I thought, what is she talking about? I had no idea what she was talking about. So I started to do some research around leadership, and then someone said, write a paper on it and put it on LinkedIn. And so I started to do that, told more and more people about it. A friend said, why don't you make it a series instead of one? Took it to another friend, said, I'll help you fix the series. Finally took it to a professor, and he said, I think you have a book here. Literally, it started out as a paper. And as I started to continue to write the book and do research on it, I started to meet more and more people. And they said, hey, could you come help us with that? And, all these things you're talking about with innovation and driving change. And I said, sure. And so literally, it just all was a manifestation of just immersing myself in something I was interested in. And, here I am a couple of years into it now. It's been a really awesome journey with a published book.
Absolutely. And the book is The Optimizer. What is the crux of the argument in the Optimizer?
And the idea is that, as leaders, you're inextricably tied to leading change, right? You can't, if you're operating the way you were 3, 5, 10 years ago, you've got a problem. And if you don't know that that's going on, it's probably because people are afraid to tell you. So the idea is you have to drive change, and yet employees fear change tremendously. So how do you create this environment where you can bridge that gap, if you will? So the idea is creating the safe, trusting environment where you can unleash the talent of your team. And what I found an effective way to do that is to get them to think in incremental steps constantly. So each week, each month, allocating, 5, 10, 15% of their time to thinking about how to run things better and developing a process to make that happen. And then as their coach, their leader, their trusted advisor, helping to manage that for them. And then as things progress, they get better at it, make it public, let others benefit from it. And that's really, in a very short sense, that's really the system that I developed. And it was awesome to go out and interview dozens of executives across many industries and find out that there's similar things happening out there in the world. Talked to an executive at Microsoft, at the Motley Fool, a Napa Cult winemaker, a luxury interior designer, a principal. So it's fascinating. I originally wrote the book for financial services, given my background, and it was fascinating to see that it really spans the industries.
Now, you just described it using a word which in some circles of the innovation community is a bit of a dirty word, and that's incremental. A lot of people, when they talk about innovation, they think, oh, you've got to think big, you've got to think transformative, leave the incremental stuff to the core business. What's your view on that? How does incremental innovation sort of actually work in your perspective?
So I think it might best be told through a story. So my company, we made a very innovative decision, which was a massive change. We were a sales organization, asset management firm. I was in the sales group. And we realized we had to change our value proposition. We can no longer just be sales people. We have to increase what we do for our clients, which was very innovative thinking, especially about 10, 11, 12 years ago in Wall Street. So we put our people through this massive training thing, which was very innovative, big change for them. And it hit a ton of resistance. It was a totally different way to operate every day. And people had to work differently. They had to think differently and act differently. So I went to my team and challenged them. I said, I don't know what the path forward here is, but I think the way we get there is just keep plugging away at it, and each week trying to figure out better ways to do it. So the short version of that story is, through those challenges, my team members consistently looked for better ways to execute on this. And where we landed was, by the end of this journey, it took 2 or 3 years to get here, there was much progress along the way, but where we started, which was how do I use these coaching tools and consulting tools, to my team was out running 4-hour offsite workshops for their top clients. So here's a salesperson on Wall Street going out and running a 4-hour offsite to help a team rethink how they do their business plan and strategy. So it was all incremental change that got us there, and it was challenging my team to raise the bar on each other, and they did that. And the results couldn't have been more impactful, because when you have that relationship with a client that you're selling something to, they become clients forever. So there's a perfect example of very small changes we made from week to week, and 2-3 years on, we were literally changing the landscape of how the company was using these tools.
To paraphrase the world of financial services, it sounds like compounding.
Great analogy, yes.
Yeah, so small changes add up over time. I think a lot of people don't give that enough credit. Sometimes frequent small changes add up. It reminds me of the time that I was working with the British Olympic team before their home Olympic Games. And one of the real sort of pieces of ethos that helped, especially the cycling team, was try and find a way to become 1% better every day. And it sounds like a very small amount, but 1% better over 365 days is nearly 4 times as good. And sometimes it's hard to improve your performance by 4 times in a year, but in certain cases, it probably is possible.
And I believe this is the journey. And I can't stress enough, as a leader and now working with folks as a coach, people, I said it already, but I'll say it again, people fear change. And this incremental approach to me was the bridge to get them over that. Because anyone can deal with, small steps, if you will. And the way I've seen this add up over time is just extraordinary. And again, we went from taking something completely innovative in the industry that most of my team members were just put up a wall to and said, I don't want to do this, to leading the charge on changing how the company was operating. It was pretty amazing to see.
So how do you get that sort of buy-in? What sort of advice do you have on companies on how to go about breaking down these big changes into something that's more manageable and people are going to be less resistant to?
First, it all starts with relationship and trust building. And I believe those 2 words, as much as they kind of get used and maybe seem cliche, I think as a leader, they need to be part of your business plan. What have I done this week? What's on my calendar this week, this month, to deepen the relationship with my team members, to build trust? And do my actions actually speak to those words or follow up on those words? I'll give you another simple example. I had to do a reorg a few years ago, and I could have, I had a gentleman leave my team, and I said, should I rehire him or do I do a reorganization? And long story short, instead of going through all the hoops, instead of just dumping it in his lap, which oftentimes is the case, hey, here's a new change, Nick, take it or leave it, right? I'm your boss, here's the deal. I went to him and I said, Dave, you've been around here longer than me. I'd love to see your take on, if I did a reorg here, what might it look like? He couldn't believe I asked him that question. And so he then, because this reorg was going to impact him dramatically, it's going from very few overnight stays as a traveling salesman to many as a seasoned guy, that was looking a bit painful. That was what inspired me to do it. He went, built the reorg, came back with a plan that looked 75, 80% like what I built already. And now this reorg that was very disruptive to his life was his basically custom built plan. I mean, how do you reject a plan that you built, right? I mean, think about that. And think about the message that he then went out to his peers and said, hey, holy cow, this reorg, people asked him, what do you think of it? Well, I built it. I think it's pretty good. As opposed to, let's do the reverse, right? I say, hey, here's the new deal, take it or leave it. And what does he then go to say to his peers? Oh, my boss gave me this bad deal. I really don't like him. He's not nice, this kind of thing, right? So it's getting to know them on a different level, where they like to go on vacation, what motivates them, how do you inspire them, and then taking real action to build trust, as the example with the reorg there.
Sounds like Amy Edmondson's theory of psychological safety.
I'm not familiar with her work, but it's very much in psychological safety category for sure.
Absolutely. So that's one really good example. for maybe one individual, but quite often things fall down when they either get into the team level or especially the leadership level. Have you got any sort of insights as to how those two groups can think of optimizing their work and their innovation strategy?
Yeah, I think my theory is really around making it part of the mindset, the culture, if you will. And again, it sounds a bit cliche to say that, but when you get everyone to start thinking like this, hey, how do I get a little bit better all the time? And the way you really make it work is to put it in writing. So I ask people to put, like, how are you going to get better this year, this quarter, this month, whatever your timeline is. I think it has to be somewhere less than a year to work on these ideas, and then be their coach to help make that happen. So check in with them on a very regular basis. Hey, here's your new plan. Help them come up with the idea through being their trusted advisor, meaning, help them define the problem. Don't give them a solution. If they can come up with the idea, so not just the reorg, but anything. So I constantly pressed my team with open-ended questions. How are you going to improve? Don't let me tell you what you need to work on. Let me help you discover that. And once they embrace that, and then they come up with new ideas, I have them share it with others. Hey, Carolyn's been working on this for a few months. It worked. And I'd have her share that with the team. Now the team gets to start operating at this sort of 3-month starting point, if you will, versus the challenges she faced the last 3 months. And then what I found happens is people continue to do that to each other. So it levels up the whole team. And it can very much become, I hate to use the word contagious in this day and age, but it become this environment where everyone wants to step in and be the person that helps keep pulling everyone forward. And then it becomes this thing where it becomes a pull rather than a push from my end. So I think it can become a systematic ideal where everyone can embrace it at any level.
Is that goal setting exercise something every individual needs to do though? Or is it something teams can do as well?
Well, I think as an individual, you certainly need to say, what do I specifically need to work on? But as a team, so let's go back to my analogy with the coaching content. So each individual, I had to work on what part they thought they could improve upon. But as a team, we had a goal of, hey, we need to figure out how to execute on these tools better. So there was, I think, breaking down between macro and micro is very important.
And what about at the decision maker level? Because quite often change is maybe scariest for the people who are most affected by it. And those are the people who have their necks on the line in some cases before they're brave enough to make the decision. Can you break down the big changes into smaller changes if they are at that really high strategic level as well?
I think the same can apply. And again, back to this incremental optimization concept, if you're not, if you're allocating 5 or 10% of your time in a week or a month to these types of new changes, I don't think that's going to disrupt people's day-to-day activities terribly. And what I found over time is if they are going through this exercise of growing and learning, it actually has a bigger impact on the rest of the things they're operating. It helps them operate more effectively in other ways because they learn something new and say, oh, I could apply this to something I'm doing over here. So I think it can happen at any level.
So let's go. I really enjoyed your first specific example. Have you got maybe an example of someone who was really resistant, maybe at a executive level? How do you go about discussing the concepts with someone like that?
So here's a great example. Let me ask you a rhetorical question. Do you get too many or not enough emails in your life, Nick?
Right? I think we all know what the answer there is.
So I was getting very frustrated with how this change initiative was happening at my old company. And one of the bottlenecks I realized after creating a process map for what we were actually trying to execute on, I was like, what is holding us up here? So I created the process map for everything we did. And I realized that emails were a big problem for us. And so I went out. So I'm going to come back to your point. I promise you. I realized, all right, where are these emails coming from? Well, the way our organization was set up, the most emails were coming from internal constituents. It was because the marketing people were marketing to our sales force, and then they went out to the clients. They did some broad marketing, but mostly their audience was the sales force. And so one person would send out an email and say, and then someone else would see it and say, oh, well, this other product manager is sending out a bunch of stuff, so I need to do the same. So it became this race to email the sales force more. So I had a meeting. I asked all the product lead managers to come sit down with me. And I just simply asked them, tell me about your email strategy and campaign. And how effective is it? And how do you measure that? And quite frankly, they didn't have a very concrete answer to that. So I had already thought about some solutions for it after working with some people on it. One was, gosh, if we could get greater engagement with your messaging, help the sales force understand your message better, and track what's working and what's not working, would that be useful to you? And they're like, absolutely. So we took these, literally dozens of emails that our sales force was getting week to week and jammed it into one email, if you will, or condensed it, I should say. And they were hot links. So each week went by, you got all the updates once a week. We could track who was clicking on what. You could see what was popular, what wasn't, and this kind of thing. And we tested it a number of different ways. We ended up sending it out at 6 a.m. on Mondays. But so it streamlined the communication. It took all the way away from all the noise. If the people wanted the information, they knew where to find it. And it very much, I had to go to the tops of all the product groups to go get that sold. And I just did it through, is this working? Is it effective? And oftentimes that question doesn't get asked.
Did you meet any resistance there, though? What happens if 90% of the people agree that initiative or a change is a good idea, but there's one individual who says, nope, I want to keep doing things the way they are? Does that mean that everyone else has to stop their activity as well?
Right. There's oftentimes that one person who, because for them, it's a loss. There's a loss of control. I want to send emails whenever I want. This is my thing, what have you. The way I like to deal with that is get them more engaged with the process. All right, well, is the current system working? Their answer to that is probably not going to be yes. So tell me how to fix it. Here's my idea. And sometimes you can meet in the middle and still make it work. But that buy-in, that relationship building, it goes a long way to, making change initiative happen, even if people don't want to.
So building trust is important. Building relationships is important. How about when you don't necessarily know what change you should be trying to implement? If you got any advice on how to find these small, new, incremental innovation things to try out?
That's the beauty of this concept, because you're constantly challenging your team to do that, to look around themselves and say, where's something happening that I can improve upon? If it's how they did their team leader meetings, if how they ran their business from day to day, week to week, what they were doing at 8 a.m. versus 4 p.m, how they structured the agenda of their team meetings, how they thought about creating presentations, whatever it was. I think this can happen in so many different ways and shapes and forms, and everyone can be a part of the journey.
Perfect. John, I've really enjoyed speaking with you today. I think there's been a lot of really great insights. If people want to find out more about you and your work, what's the best place they can go to find out more?
Yeah, the easiest place to find me is my website. It's just my name, John C. Saunders, Saunders, johncsaunders.com. And certainly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, where my handle is JCS, my initials _optimizer. Pretty easy to find me out there.
Perfect. I'll make sure to get those links down in the description below. John, it's been wonderful speaking with you, and I look forward to speaking again with you soon.
Nick, great to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for listening. If you liked it, please like, share, and subscribe, and leave me a comment about what you thought and what you'd like to see more about. If you want to take your creativity and innovation capabilities to the next level, then invest in yourself with the premium training only available at ideatovalue.com. These exclusive training modules have all been put together by me, Nick Skillicorn, and have been used by thousands of artists, innovation leaders, and CEOs to become better at understanding the source of their creativity and executing on their innovation ambitions. And there is no risk to you, as they're backed by our money-back guarantee. Now, don't forget to go out there and make your ideas a reality. See you again soon.